Growing up, I never thought much about my stepbrother. He was just there. A part of the new life my mom had built with her second marriage, but not really a part of mine. We didn't talk much beyond casual hellos or random, meaningless conversations. He wasn't rude or distant, just neutral, like we lived side by side without ever really meeting. And I was fine with that. At least, I thought I was. But that all changed one rainy afternoon. Everyone had gone out, my mom, his dad, even our younger siblings, leaving just the two of us alone in the house. The rain was coming down in sheets, tapping against the windows, filling the silence between us. I remember sitting in the living room, flipping through channels on the TV without really watching anything. He was on the other side of the couch, closer than usual, but I didn't think much of it. At first, it felt normal. Just two people stuck in the house on a gloomy day, waiting for time to pass. But then something shifted. I don't know how to explain it, but suddenly the quiet between us wasn't comfortable anymore. It was heavy, like something unspoken was hanging in the air, and I could feel his eyes on me, even when I wasn't looking. I glanced over, trying to shake off the weird feeling, but he was staring at me. Not in a creepy way, just staring, like he was trying to figure something out. I blinked, feeling a strange knot form in my stomach. "You okay?" I asked, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet room. He shrugged, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" He hesitated for a second, his gaze dropping before meeting mine again. "Do you ever feel like things are different between us?" His words caught me off guard. Different? We'd never really been close, so what was there to be different? I didn't know how to respond. My heart started beating faster, but I didn't know why. "I don't know," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you mean?" He sighed, leaning back against the couch. "It's just weird. I feel like we used to ignore each other. But now," he trailed off, and the silence that followed felt louder than anything. I didn't know what to say. We weren't close enough to have this kind of conversation, and yet here we were. I felt my stomach twist, a mixture of confusion and something else I couldn't name. The air between us felt charged, like we were teetering on the edge of something neither of us understood. "I don't think anything's different," I said, trying to brush it off, but my voice wavered. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he just looked at me, really looked at me, and I felt my skin prickle under his gaze. There was something in his eyes I couldn't read, and it made me nervous. "You sure?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost like he didn't want to push, but he couldn't help himself. I swallowed hard, the knot in my stomach tightening. "Yeah, I'm sure." But I wasn't. Not really. Something had changed and we both knew it. I just didn't know what it was, or why it felt so strange to acknowledge it. He stood up then, breaking the moment. "I'm gonna grab something to drink. You want anything?" I shook my head, watching him disappear into the kitchen. The second he left the room, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My heart was racing, my thoughts all over the place. What was happening? Why did it suddenly feel like everything between us was shifting? I sat there, trying to calm down, but the quiet felt even heavier now that he was gone. A minute later, he came back, holding 2 glasses of water. I didn't ask for one, but he handed me a glass anyway. His fingers brushed mine as I took it, and I flinched, not because I was scared, but because the touch sent a strange jolt of something through me. "Sorry," he mumbled, but his eyes were still on me, watching my reaction. "It's fine," I muttered, setting the glass down on the table without drinking from it. I stood up, suddenly needing to get out of the room, away from the tension that was growing thicker with every second. "I think I'm gonna go upstairs for a bit," I said quickly. He nodded, not saying anything, but as I walked past him, I could feel his eyes on me. The back of my neck tingled, and a flush crept up my cheeks. I didn't understand what was happening or why everything felt so charged, but I knew I needed space. When I got to my room, I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. My mind was racing, replaying the last few minutes over and over. I felt strange, confused, like I was standing on the edge of something I wasn't ready for, but it was already happening, whether I wanted it to or not. I sat down on my bed, staring at the wall, my thoughts swirling. We'd always ignored each other, kept to our own lives, our own spaces. But now, suddenly, there was this tension between us that hadn't been there before, and I didn't know what to do with it. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was a text from him. "Are you okay?" The message made my heart skip a beat, though I couldn't explain why. I hesitated for a second before typing back a quick response. "Yeah, just tired." I set the phone down, thinking that would be the end of it, but less than a minute later, there was a knock on my door. Before I could answer, he stepped inside. He stood in the doorway, his face serious, and for a moment neither of us said anything. The silence between us felt heavier than it ever had before. "You sure you're okay?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. I nodded, but the way he was looking at me made my pulse quicken. It wasn't like before when we could just exist in the same space without thinking about it. Now every glance, every word, felt loaded with meaning I didn't understand. "I just needed a break," I said, my voice coming out softer than I intended. He stepped inside, moving closer, and sat down on the edge of my bed. I stiffened, unsure of what he was doing. His presence filled the room in a way that made it hard to breathe. "You don't have to be weird around me, you know," he said, his tone gentle, but there was something else there too. "I don't want things to change between us." "I don't want that either," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if it was true. Things were already changing, and there was no going back. We sat there in silence for a long moment, the rain still falling outside. It should have been comforting, the familiar sound of it against the windows, but instead, it only made the quiet inside the room feel more intense. I glanced at him, and when our eyes met, something shifted again. The air between us crackled with an unspoken tension, something neither of us knew how to address. He reached out and placed his hand gently on mine. The touch was simple, but the weight of it felt enormous. I froze, my heart racing, unsure of what to do. His fingers curled around mine, not letting go, and the warmth from his hand spread through me, a mix of comfort and confusion. "I miss how things used to be," he said softly, his voice so low it was almost a whisper. "I feel like we're drifting apart, and I hate it." I swallowed hard, my mind spinning. "We're not drifting apart," I said, but even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Something was different between us, something we didn't know how to fix. "You don't feel it?" he asked, his hand still resting on mine. "Like something's changed?" I didn't know how to answer him, because yes, something had changed, but I didn't know what it was or how to deal with it. All I knew was that the line between us was blurring in ways that scared me, ways I wasn't sure I was ready for. Instead of pulling my hand away, I tightened my grip on his, like holding on to him could somehow anchor me, like it could keep everything from spiraling out of control. But it wasn't just that. I didn't want to let go. I didn't want to acknowledge what was happening between us, but I also didn't want to lose him. "You know I'd never hurt you, right?" he said quietly, his eyes searching mine, looking for something I wasn't sure I could give him. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Of course I knew that. He'd always been there, always been someone I could rely on, even if we hadn't been particularly close. But this, whatever this was, felt dangerous, like we were walking a line neither of us understood. He squeezed my hand gently, and I felt a warmth spread through me, a mix of comfort and something else I couldn't quite name. "I just want things to go back to how they were," he continued, his voice soft, almost pleading. "Before all this weirdness between us." "Me too," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if that was possible. Things were already different, and pretending otherwise wouldn't make it go away. We sat there for what felt like an eternity, just holding hands, neither of us saying anything. The rain outside had slowed to a soft drizzle, the world outside feeling distant, almost irrelevant. All that mattered in that moment was the two of us sitting there in my room, trying to figure out what this new tension between us meant. Finally, he stood up, letting go of my hand. "I should probably go," he said, but there was hesitation in his voice, like he didn't really want to leave. I nodded, watching him walk to the door. He paused, his hand on the doorknob, before turning back to look at me. "We'll be okay, right?" he asked, and there was a vulnerability in his eyes that made my chest tighten. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe that everything would go back to normal, that we could just forget this strange moment between us. But deep down, I knew the truth. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, me neither." And with that, he left, closing the door behind him. As soon as he was gone, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My mind was racing, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what had just happened, but why everything felt so different now. All I knew was that something between us had shifted, and there was no going back to the way things were before. I lay back on my bed, staring up at the ceiling, the quiet of the house pressing in on me. I didn't know how to feel, didn't know what any of this meant, but I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same between us again. And the scariest part was, I wasn't sure if I wanted it to be. The next morning, The weight of what had happened the previous night still hung in the air. I woke up feeling uneasy. The memory of my stepbrother sitting on my bed, holding my hand, playing over and over in my head. I couldn't shake it. The lines between us had blurred, and I wasn't sure how to navigate them anymore. When I went downstairs, I found him at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. For a moment, our eyes met, and everything from last night rushed back. But instead of acknowledging it, we pretended nothing had happened. We didn't talk about it. We didn't even make eye contact. I poured myself a cup of coffee, trying to act like everything was normal, but the silence was suffocating. The kind of silence where you knew things had changed, but no one wanted to admit it. He finally broke the silence. "We'll be okay," he said softly, like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. I nodded, but deep down I wasn't sure. The tension between us had shifted into something neither of us knew how to handle. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure if I wanted things to go back to the way they were. The day passed quietly. We avoided each other, but the tension lingered in the background. That evening, after everyone came home, the house was noisy again, but I felt out of place, like I didn't belong in this new dynamic between my stepbrother and me. Later, he sat down next to me on the couch, close enough that I could feel his presence. We didn't talk for a while, but finally he broke the silence again. "About last night," he started. I tensed up, not ready to talk about it. But he continued. "I didn't mean to make things weird. I guess I just got confused." I nodded, understanding but still unsure. "It's just weird now, you know." "Yeah," he said, his gaze fixed on the TV. "I don't want things to change between us. I don't want to lose what we have." "I don't either," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if that was possible. Things had already changed, and there was no way to undo it. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about him, about how everything had shifted between us. I didn't know if we could ever go back to the way things were before. But one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again.